Good afternoon and welcome to After Hours and at the lovely cottage at the Mayne Resort. This afternoon we're having a conversation with two beautiful young ladies about a very serious topic, actually. Lesley Musset, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Correne, I'm going to have a hard time saying, Antrobus. Thank you for coming to the show.
You're welcome.
And you're here because we're going to talk about several organizations, Holding Hope, Mom Stop the Harm. So let's begin by talking about the history and which came first and what it does and why it's there.
Well, I'll start if you like. Mum Stop the Harm is a Canada-wide organization, and it was started by 3 mums, I believe, one of whom has a place on Mayne Island, Petra Schultz, and another lady, Lesley McBain, who lives on Pender, and then Helen?
Lorna
Thomas. And I think she lives in Alberta. Not sure. I haven't met her. But anyway, they found each other after they lost their children to drug poisoning. And I think this was about 2014. I think Lesley and Petra
roughly
kind of connected. Their sons, both of them had sons, died accidentally through poison drug supply way back then in 2014. And
do you know how they met? Because, it's one of those things you don't go public with, I don't think. It's more people, feel uncomfortable or whatever, which they shouldn't, but...
Do you know the story? But I think it was either Lesley's brother or it was Lesley's brother, I believe, who read something or heard something about Petra reaching out about what had happened to her son Danny and Lesley's son, and he said to his sister, I just heard about this lady in Alberta in Edmonton talking about her son dying of overdose, just like what happened with you and with Jordan. Mm-hmm. That's Lesley's son, and you guys should get together. And they did.
And how long have you been involved, Correne, in the organization?
I've been involved for quite some time now. I want to say at least five plus years. Mm-hmm. I heard Lesley on the radio, and I had to pull over my car because finally someone was talking about what I was going through, because people weren't talking about it prior to when the fentanyl crisis was announced, which was 2016, I think. Yeah, April 14th, 2016 was when the crisis became a public health emergency.
Did you ever expect, either of you, did you ever expect that you would have that happen in your family and to yourselves? Talk a bit about that.
Not really. Not from my point of view. I mean, I had 3 children, a daughter first, Heather, and 2 sons, and they did well in school. They went through school fine. I mean, got a bit into drinking, probably smoking weed.
Kids stuff.
Yeah, kids stuff. Smoking weed a little bit and that kind of thing. And but we did notice our daughter Heather had some issues with anxiety and depression when she was in her sort of teen years, mid-teens, I guess. And so we took her to the doctor. We lived in South Surrey then, so we took her to our family doctor, and she was put on Ativan. It wasn't something that we did, without thinking a lot about it, because I knew a little bit about it, that it was quite addictive. But anyways, it seemed to really work for her. She graduated from high school, no problem, went to college and was working in a job outside of college and doing quite well. And we noticed that things started to kind of go sideways when her doctor, I think there was kind of a pressure from the doctors to be careful about prescribing benzos. They're benzos, right? Benzodiazepine, Ativan?
Yes, I
Yeah, I think
is.
it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I guess the medical college noticed that there was some addiction going on, and it was growing, and so I think they pressured their doctors to be more careful about prescribing it, and so she started to try and wean Heather off. I think it maybe went a bit too quickly, and before we knew it, she was getting, going to the streets in White Rock. This was. We lived in White Rock at the time, or Crescent Beach, and then she started, finding alternatives, and so that was.
It's interesting because I think most people think there's a certain type of person who would be, and you can correct all my language as we go. Like when you mentioned prescription drugs, I had a friend who was in a car accident. She started taking prescription drugs and became addicted and became a real problem. Mm-hmm. But also I think we have this stereotype of what kind of people take drugs or become addicted to alcohol, any various substance. Can you talk about your story?
Yes, certainly, and it's quite similar. I have 3 children as well. She's my eldest daughter, and she'll be 33 next week. Again, graduated with honors. We live in Victoria. Did fine, had great friends all through high school. Everything played sports, just swimming, water polo, softball. After high school, she got a job at a liquor store. She was going to college and got a part-time job. And that's when the problems began. It was from alcohol. And alcohol, I have learned, and it may not be true, but apparently can be a gateway. I think a lot of things can be. But the alcohol was a gateway for her. It moved on to cocaine. Then it went to pills. And then it went to heroin. And now it's at fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And it has been, as I say, so she's 33 on Wednesday next week. And this has been going on, I want to say, since she was probably 19. Yeah, it must have been 19 because it was through high school, just normal, not even pot, not even really, just normal things.
Stuff.
Yeah. I mean, she did ride off a car. Maybe that's in grade 12. But no, nothing really out of line. She did have a bit of anxiety, though. So maybe I never really thought about that. But she did. She did. And she was put on... it was called Paxil back then.
Same, type of thing.
So when it first started, when you first realized that it wasn't kids' stuff anymore, or there was a serious problem now, what did you do? Were there places to go? Who would you contact? Did you, or were you, talk a bit about that.
You want to go?
I think with Heather, she kind of hid it very well, and her bedroom was in the basement, which was convenient. But her brother was across the hall. I used to find alcohol bottles and things like that in her bedroom, and it concerned me a little bit. We talked about where the liquor was kept in our house, and if you're going to drink in the house, it needs to go in the cupboard up there. We don't want you drinking down there on your own and that sort of thing. And then you're hearing other opinions like, oh, it's their room, you should just sort of let them have their room to their place themselves and all that. So I went through that a little bit, but I knew that there was something else going on. And then people started telling me that they'd seen Heather with groups, people on the street. Actually, this happened in about 2013. She and I took a course, and we were working in a cold weather shelter that was attached to the United Church in Victoria, and in White Rock rather, and so we knew people coming in off the streets who were homeless, and they would come in and have a meal and stay overnight on the floor, and we would be there serving meals and cleaning up after it and all that kind of thing. And so we got to know different people. And I happened to be out of the country visiting my mum, who was ill, and Fred, my husband, was concerned because she was bringing people from the shelter to our house. Well, Dad, it's fine because Mum knows them. but it wasn't quite what we were expecting. So that was kind of a key right then. And yeah, she seemed to be almost comfortable with people that were, homeless on the street. It was like she had wore her heart on her sleeve, and she kind of reached out trying to help these people. And then I think with the whole anxiety thing, the fact that the Ativan was being taken away, I think that was sort of how she got into that
felt comfortable
situation.
with the people.
Well,
that
yeah,
were
they're she used to tell me they're totally accepting, and this is what we know. I mean, as far as I know, she's never been abused or bullied in high school or anything. We were never told about that. I know often there's some trauma in backgrounds of people that struggle with addiction, but as far as I know, there isn't. And I've often wondered, is there something she's not telling us? But as far as help, because that was what your question was, it was always like, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like I can stop whenever I want, kind of thing. Even though we would talk about it, my husband and I talk about it from time to time. Well, often, she was always, no, I'm good. You don't have to worry. It was only, I think, one time she called my husband. He was at work and she was in a park, and she said, Dad, I need help. I need you to take me to the hospital. And that was the only time she's ever really reached out and asked for help. And he did take her to Surrey Memorial, and they transferred her to the drug and alcohol place that's across, it's right behind Surrey Memorial, I can't think what it's called. And they didn't have a bed. They didn't have a bed. They said, not for 3 weeks. And they actually encouraged him to drive to Vancouver with Heather and almost like lie, really, that he was from Vancouver. And so
get her in somewhere.
To get her in somewhere in Vancouver. But yeah, so he did. He drove to Vancouver with her in the car, and she went along with him. And she was clearly struggling in withdrawals. And but there was nothing. There was nothing right then. And they gave her Ativan in the hospital to just get her, to stabilize her, yeah. And as what often happens when people like Heather and Sarah, go to the hospital, they stabilize them with Ativan, and then it's like they leave, they take off. Because
they're feeling better.
They're feeling better.
Can you talk about your story a little bit that way, who you're, when you mention rehab, that's one of the problems. There aren't enough places for people to go when they say, I need help or I want it now. Now, not tomorrow, not 3 months from now. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. What happened with my daughter, there wasn't really any signs that there was drugs involved until I was sitting at a baseball park with my other daughter at a tournament. It was Mother's Day, and I get a call from my daughter's boyfriend that she's overdosed and was in the hospital. And I was like, what? Anyway, so I raced up to the hospital, and it was some sort of pills. I don't know what it was at that point. And that was kind of the beginning of it, when I was aware of what was going on. And we went right from the hospital to detox. They took her, this was quite a few years ago now. And we had a great family doctor. Anyway, that was the first time. So she went to detox. After that, she continued down that path, and it moved on. I don't know when it changed from, cocaine to heroin and now fentanyl. But there was one other time she asked for help. We couldn't get into detox. It was impossible. So the only other option, and I spent days, hours reaching out through the phone book or the computer trying to find somewhere I could send her. There was nowhere except if you wanted to pay. So then we did send her, and it's $32,000 for 6 weeks. You can get in that day. That's what people will do. It's still happening. It's actually even harder now to get in for any help. So we sent her there, and it was a great program. Over time, she did relapse and, started again, and we've had overdoses. Since the crisis has, now with the poison drug supply, And I do know, for an example, in Victoria, because of COVID, etc., there's a 3-month wait now for detox through the Royal Jubilee Hospital. 3 months. I mean, people that have any type of, if they're dealing with their addiction and they want to get help, they need to be helped that day. You cannot tell somebody, oh, you come back in a month or so. You know, it does not work. I mean, the minute they could die that night, I mean, it's so toxic what's out there right now. So, you know, and I mean, I'm really involved in the system. I've lived in the same town. I've lived all my life. I know the roots and that, and it is impossible. Even back when we tried to get her on methadone, that was quite a few years ago. Methadone's become much more mainstream now, but you couldn't get an appointment to get it prescribed. It was a month wait. So we were having to go up island. I mean, the stuff that we've had to go through, that has changed now. I mean, it's talked about a lot more because of the crisis, you know, the amount of people that are dying, but the help is not there. It's still not there. Even when they speak on the news about, we've opened up red fish.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. There's 105.
Riverview Hospital.
Oh, is that where it is?
Yeah.
105 new beds, which the government's, you know, that's wonderful. 105 recovery beds, but they're not telling you they've shut something with 100 beds. So really there's 5 new beds.
So I wanted to talk, there's so many things I'm thinking right now. So Lisa Lapointe, who is the BC Chief Coroner, since January 2016, she's calling this a pandemic. People are dying.
Yes.
Are both your daughters on the street and in that cycle of use?
Yep.
Yeah. And apparently from January 2016, June 2021, 24,626 people have died from drug problems. How do you feel about the idea of harm reduction?
Well, from my point of view, I think, you know, that is the way to go, because harm reduction, and also I would say safe supply, but harm reduction in that you're taking the individual and considering, you know, where they are in their journey kind of thing, and meeting them where they are, rather than, we used to talk years ago about, they have to hit rock bottom, you know, and ask for help and that sort of thing, you know, and parents were discouraged from enabling their kids. But that doesn't work. I mean, this is a disease like any other disease.
It's a health issue.
It's a disease. Like, I mean, and people with cancer or diabetes or heart disease, they go and they get help. And this is a disease, and we have to treat it like a disease and administer help to people that are struggling where they are. So I think, you know, harm reduction is basically, you know, if we gave them safe supply, which is the medical grade heroin / fentanyl, and it's regulated, so they're not going to get poisoned by it.
And they have their drugs so they can stabilize.
Yeah, that's right.
The idea that, gradually. And then maybe they can start thinking differently, not.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. I went to a conference and there were people from all over the world, and one of the places was Switzerland, and they were putting all this money. It wasn't just supply the drugs. I think people think that with harm reduction. It was housing.
Yes. Housing is huge.
Food.
Housing is huge.
Talk a bit about that.
I agree as well with Lesley. Harm reduction can stabilize someone. Safe supply, both. I've learned so much over this journey, and as you become educated, you really change your mind on what you think and what you believe, because you've learned. And for my daughter, if she was on a safe supply, that stops the survival crimes, which affects the courts, the jails, everything, the policing. She could probably have a job. I mean, if she was on a safe supply of whatever she needed, she could probably hold down a job. I mean, they are living in such chaotic lives, trying to find their drugs so they don't get sick. and now you're dealing with Russian roulette because every time someone uses, they could die.
That's right.
I mean, we're hearing just last week there was fentanyl in cocaine in Victoria, and that's a whole nother level. So Safe Supply, I'm 100% behind. I would love my daughter to get on Safe Supply, but the problem with that, it's a very, they're just doing pilot projects right now for Safe Supply, so there's not enough for the 100,000 people that are apparently using illicit drugs. That there's only a very, very small minority that can get on Safe Supply.
And I think in Switzerland, for example, it was like it was an economist I talked to, which was really interesting. Yes, you have to put out a lot of money to provide all of this. It has to be the rehab centers, it has to be housing, it has to be the drug itself. But in the end, people change their lives.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right.
Yeah, but yeah, safe supply, but housing too is definitely. I mean, I just think about the way my daughter. I mean, I'm not in contact with my daughter as much as Correne is with hers, but the way I imagine her life to be is that every morning she gets up and she needs to go and find her drugs. And so that means leaving wherever she has stayed the night. I think she may be in a bit of an okay place right now because a friend of hers has a room in a shelter house, and I think from what I've heard from other people, she's staying there. But other than that, she has slept on the street in doorways and things like that. I know that for a fact. So she'd be getting up, and the first thing on her mind would be to get that drug so that she's not exhibiting all kinds of withdrawal symptoms. And I've seen her in withdrawal, and it's absolutely awful. So she would get the drugs, and so she'd have to have the money to buy them, and she would get the money however, sex trade or however, and then she would get the drugs, and if she's smart, she would take them to a safe injection site. She's not, as far as I know, she's inhaling, but so that's what the smart person does, is takes them to
Somewhere
get tested,
safe.
to make sure that the levels of whatever fentanyl and all kinds of other junk that's in it is safe enough. And then she'd have to find a place and use it, you know. So that's how she starts her day. That's how she starts her day.
It's the whole.
Yeah. And so
It's the only path there is that they have. They don't have any way to branch out.
And people have told me they've seen her, you know, and like garbage bags, you know, bags over her shoulder and that kind of thing. Because I mean, somebody who's homeless carry their home with them, or leave things at different friends, and then have to, you know, negotiate going back and finding them and that. So having their own place from which to go from, and if they were going to a pharmacy where they would be getting a safe supply.
A prescription.
Yeah, prescription.
You're in touch with your daughter?
I am.
How does that feel, the sort of contrast of being in one world and visiting another?
There's been times I wasn't in contact with her, but as I said, over the years I've learned a lot more. So I meet her where she's at, where before I would nag and say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? That doesn't work. I just have to meet her where she's at. I am willing to pay for her phone to have minutes, where before I wouldn't have, because I was trying to
change her.
Yeah, and trying to, you know, that rock bottom. But no, I'll pay for her minutes. I am grateful. I phone her. If I don't hear from her for a few days, I panic, and I will text her boyfriend, who will get back to me. Same thing. She's been homeless, street, alleys, all that. Been arrested for crashing in the foyer of a building, but they did let her go because she had family that showed up to court to support her. And that makes all the difference. If you know, if she calls me and says, you know, I need help, I will go and help her. But yeah, she is the same type of thing. She's crashing in a room at a shelter that's someone else's room that's letting her crash there. But they always have a lot of stuff. It's a thing. We don't know that everyone's got a lot of knapsacks and bags because it's their possessions, right?
Yeah, that's all they have.
Their food and clothes. Although food, I would think it would be the last thing they'd be thinking about.
Probably.
Yeah. But
so holding hope, is it I really appreciate you talking about like the harm reduction and your personal stories and stuff. Does Holding Hope or Mom Stop the Harm, are you a self-help type group? Do you do advocacy work? Or do you plan to do? Anyways, talk a bit about that.
well, do you want to talk about Mom Stop the Harm because you know more about it?
Mom Stop the Harm, as Lesley gave the background on that, they are the umbrella of the Holding Hope support groups, which are peer-led support groups for families with loved ones struggling. So all the facilitators have a loved one in the same situation. So they're just peer-led, non-judgmental. They're just amazing support groups that there's no
help
stigma.
each other.
Yes.
You help each other find places or rehab, everything that's.
It's support for one another.
That's it. Yeah, we do. I missed not being able to go to the one in Victoria. My husband and I used to go over every week on a Sunday to attend a group. And then I think the date changed and COVID happened and everything. And so we weren't able to go over. And so I don't really get a chance to talk about it. I mean, my friends know the situation, but they don't really want to talk about it. It's too sad, But when you're with another person who's in that same situation, you know that they're feeling the same way. And it really helps. And I'm just reaching out to see if there's anyone on Mayne that would like to, have that experience, if there's somebody on Mayne. Because chances are whenever you do kind of get brave and open up about it, people will say, oh, my nephew, my mother, her brother. And they do. They're just waiting for a chance to talk about it. But it's not something you kind of talk about when you're just having lunch quickly with someone, It's sort of...
And people can be judgmental.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting. You're saying, you wanted to change so it's no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And no, you have to come home or you have to do this. And I think people think that you can just switch switch or, cage them or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You learn.
If only.
Yeah, if only. You learn. And the beauty of these groups is for how many years so many of us had no one to talk to because of the stigma.
Yeah.
Even in our own families, there's a lot of stigma and judgment, and this won't happen to my kid, and what did you do wrong? I mean, we've heard it all, and to meet other people that are in the same situation really has been life-saving to many of us. I mean, the first time we all met, and we're all still really close, and it's been 3 years that, and Lesley and her husband, and, our other friend, we all support one another. Even now we'll text if something happened and try to help each other. And when you first found these people, we would have moms, it's mostly moms coming in, although we do take men, of course. But
Fred.
Yeah, Fred. But it is mostly moms, and when people come in, they just finally, honestly, most people cry because finally they can say, my kid did this, and everyone's going, yeah, so did mine. All the stories are so similar. But these groups are now throughout British Columbia, and we have bereavement groups as well, which are called Healing Hearts.
And Healing Hearts is slightly different because it's people who've actually lost their kids.
Correct. Correct. And as we know, in BC, we're losing 7 people every day, every single day to this crisis. That's just in BC. So we're coming up, I think it's 10,000 people coming up when it's inching towards that, just in British Columbia. So it's a big crisis.
So have you ever thought of gathering to go to politicians? Do you talk to politicians? Talk a bit about that.
Mums do, don't they? Mum Stop the Harm, definitely. Petra and Lesley and they have met with Justin Trudeau. They talked to the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Judy Darcy, and also the new one, I can't remember.
Well, they're in BC, it's Sheila Malcolmson, but they just met at a round table in Ottawa. Well, they weren't in Ottawa, but with the new Minister of Mental Health and Addictions for Canada, which is Carolyn Bennett is her name.
Okay, good. Yeah. No, they definitely lobby the government, and we're encouraged to, send letters in and all that sort of thing, because everyone who, all the people that belong to Holding Hope and Healing Hearts also belong to Mum Stop the Harm. So when they're working on something in particular, like in August, it's Overdose Awareness Day coming up, and so we always do a big push around that day.
We did a vigil,
parade, not a parade. What's the word?
Vigil.
A vigil or a march, in the Parliament buildings maybe this year. I'm not sure if there will be with COVID, but and letters to Parliament, sending pictures of loved ones. The ones that have lost theirs. They send their pictures. Or right now, they just finished doing one with black balloons.
That was bereaved mothers.
Bereaved mothers. Okay.
The advocacy is not for everybody. I'm pretty involved in it. It's just a way to something you can help bring awareness. Advocacy becomes really big to some people. It's huge, and some people put a lot of time and effort. But certain politicians are very I can't think of the term, but whatever, to our cause, sympathetic, sympathetic. We've had people to our Holding Hope group just as guests. We had Dr. Henry for a week before COVID started. We've had Lisa, what's her name, from the Green Party, Sonia Furstenau.
Oh, Sonia.
She came. Yeah. Who's, Adam Olson.
Adam Olson is very supportive. He's our MLA here.
Yeah.
He's very supportive. Elizabeth May. Yeah.
And also the Chief Coroner, Lisa Lapointe. She's just comes to anything we ask her to.
She's coming out and saying it as it is.
Absolutely she is. And it's very brave of her to say it how it is. And certain municipalities is something that's an initiative that Mum Stop the Harm started. And people can go to their municipalities and ask them to support certain things. And I don't know the numbers.
Decriminalization and safe supply,
And they have some hundreds across Canada. It's amazing. And I know my municipality, which is Saanich, the mayor of Saanich, who also has come to our meeting, he went to the mayors of all of BC and got something passed last week about them supporting, basically, Mum Stop the Harm and our initiatives. So there is a lot of support because it's becoming more talked about, but, there's still a lot of stigma. There really is.
So we're kind of running out of time. What would you like to see happen? Talk a bit about Mayne Island, Lesley, because it would be nice if...
I started displaying these signs, trying to reach out, because I go to Correne's meetings every month, and people are talking about their group, and I still don't have a group, so I listen to everybody talking about how they're doing. And there's probably about 10 that come on Zoom and we're doing this and we're doing that, and we had this speaker. And I'm still waiting to form a group. I've had a couple of people reach out to Correne, and they're here on one is in Salt Spring, I believe, and one a woman is here on Mayne. So I'm hoping if she sees this interview, she will reach out to me. I'm hoping to start a support group for myself and other people in our situation so that we can get together and support each other. Because at this point, there's not a lot I can do for my daughter. She is where she is right now, and she's not ready to make any changes in her life. So she knows, however, though, that we're there for her, because we do try and stay in touch through other people that she sees. But she's sort of always kind of tried to keep that side of her life away from her family, which I look at it as a gift in a way. She's sort of
protecting him.
Yeah, it keeps all the chaos away from us. I mean, there was a little bit of chaos a couple of years ago when we found out that she'd had a baby. And so we're busy now raising her, and whose name is Hope, by the way. And so we're raising her, and we're busy with that. And so it's, we're looking at it as a gift from Heather. She's not ready to make any changes in her life right now, but she's keeping us busy in other ways.
Well, maybe the system will change around her, which will allow her to change.
Yeah. I also think they have to be ready as well.
Yes.
They have to be ready.
They do.
Yeah. So,
What would you like to see happen in the near future?
Honestly, for me, is safe supply, because it would save people's lives.
that has to be the first.
Again, my daughter's the same. She seems to think it's just too late for her at 33 that, I've lived this life. It's just too late to go back to mainstream. I said that's not true, but for me, safe supply, because to lose people that don't have to die. Because if you look at the stats, it's not the people per se on the streets. It's the weekend warrior at home doing some cocaine that's not testing their drugs. We need a safe supply. That's, to me, the most important right now. There's so many other, working parts to this. Housing, stigma, detox. Detox can be a bit unsafe, but because then they become off the drugs, and then if they use, their tolerance is gone, they'll die. So safe supply is probably my number one, and decrim. But you asked for one, so I won't go.
No, well, to decriminalization, to criminalize the victim, it's a victimless crime.
We call it survival crimes. I always think that's such a important term, because what they're doing, they wouldn't normally do. They wouldn't go and steal, I don't know. It's all just a whole underground thing, and that would stop all of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
I hadn't heard that term, survival
I know, it's
crimes.
a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But sex work and things that they wouldn't normally have to do. But this addiction is just so, it just takes their whole body, and, they just become other people, and they're still in there. They're still in there. Mm-hmm. But it's a physical addiction that just takes over. Yeah.
Do you fear for your daughters?
Yeah, absolutely.
Every day.
Must be hard.
Every day.
If a phone call comes in and we can't identify it, it's, because it sometimes you think it's a matter of time, because I don't see or talk to mine often. I think that, it's just in the back of my mind, but thank God I've got other things to do to keep me busy. But, if
my doorbell rings at the front of my house, which no one uses that door, I automatically think it's something bad. And again, that's another term for that one. We call it anticipatory grief, because we've been living this worry for, 10, for me, 10, 12 years. And every day, worry, every single day, of course. Even more so now with the poisonous supply, definitely.
When you're hearing about it so much on the radio, now, whereas you weren't before. But
that's right.
You start your day, with the latest statistics and.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate you telling these stories.
It's important.
It is important. Don't cry, because I'll make me cry.
No, I am. It's so ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous, unnecessary. This whole idea that it's, war on drugs.
You know what we didn't get into, and I just thought of it now. Well, no, I was going to think. I always use the analogy of if the beer and wine supply were poisoned, if there'd be hell to pay, right? And
are you kidding?
And it's the same. It's a substance,
And people get addicted to it, and they're hiding behind closed doors, and
Think of Prohibition when it was poisoned, right? When they were, it was poisoned. Until you're in this or know somebody, this is what we found now. People are talking about it more, but before, it's just like, oh, did you grow up on the wrong side of the track? Like they really
Yeah.
look at.
exactly
Yeah,
what.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Just assume it's in the downtown east side and you just don't
I mean,
go
we look
there.
pretty normal, like, and it's our kids.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. Anyway.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for joining us
You're welcome.
and being so open. And thank you to the Mayne Inn Resort